Book 2, Chapter 4 Sir Tristram and the Fair Iseult. For many years after the founding of the Round Table, 2 sieges remained empty, besides the Siege Perilous. The other places might sometimes lack a name for a little while, as one knight or another was killed in some desperate battle or dangerous quest, but always there was another to take his place. But King Arthur knew that the 2 places by the Siege Perilous could not be filled so easily. These 2 places, the Siege Perilous, and one on either side of them, were of the 5 best knights in Logres, and for these alone Gawain sat in one, and Lancelot in another, to right and left of the Siege Perilous, but not even Sir Gareth or Sir Bors might sit in the 2 empty seats. Now upon a certain feast of Pentecost, when all the knights were gathered in Camelot, King Arthur spoke with Lancelot and Gawain concerning these 2 sieges. "There is one knight whose name I have heard tell of as the greatest of any," said Sir Gawain, "but to your court he has never come. Ben, he is a Cornish knight, nephew to Mark, who is king of Cornwall under your overlordship, and his name is Tristram of Lyonesse." "I met him once," said Lancelot. "He jousted with certain knights of the Round Table, Sir Lamorak and Sir Segramore, and overthrew them. Then he and I broke a lance together, and I will here avow him to be the best knight with whom I have ever yet jousted." "We will ascend into Cornwall," said King Arthur, "and bid him come to our court, for sure am I that it is of him that Merlin spoke, saying that for a little space he should sit on our board, and bring great glory to Logres. But here, methinks, begins the adventure of this day, without which we may not turn to the feast." For suddenly as he spoke, they heard in the distance outside the hall the sad, sweet notes of a harp, and as they listened the music drew nearer to them, music so sad and sweet that no man there had ever heard the like, nor might many restrain the tears from running down their cheeks. And then the minstrel came into the hall, a fine man, tall, broad, and very noble to look upon, dark hair, dark eyes, and a dignity about him that might well have become a king. Yet he was poorly clad in such humble garments as a wandering minstrel wore, and when he had bowed to King Arthur, he took his seat on a stool near the door. "Come hither, good minstrel," said Arthur, when the magic of the music had a little faded from his heart, "and play to us once more, and sing of brave deeds of noble knights and lovely ladies, for in them our heart delights. Whence come you?" "From Cornwall, noble king," answered the minstrel. "Have you heard tell of Sir Tristram of Lyonesse?" "Yea, noble Arthur, and him have I seen full often," said the minstrel, "and his story will I sing to you, a sad tale and a true one, as ye shall hear." He took the wine that was offered him in a great horn cup, drank to King Arthur, and sitting on a stool beside a great pillar, he began his lay, sometimes telling it as a story, and sometimes singing it to the sad, sweet music of the harp. The tale tells that in Lyonesse a king lived and a queen. Very happily they dwelt together, until upon a day an enemy came into the land of Rivalen, that king, to lay it waste with fire and sword. Rivalen went against him with all his men, but he was slain in battle, and Morgan the Wicked ruled his land. And at that time Morgan made search for the queen, but she had fled into the forest with one faithful follower named Rule. And there in the forest a child was born to the queen, and there she died and was buried. But before she died she gave the child to Rule. "Faith-keeper," she said, "keep faith now to your dead lord, and to your lady, who will soon be dead. Take my child and call him Tristram, for he was born in sorrow. Tend him carefully and guard him as your own son, that in a day to come he may avenge our deaths and rule once more in Lyonesse. And when he is a man, let him seek help of my brother, King Mark of Cornwall." Rule took the boy, and never was child more kindly and lovingly fostered by his own parents than was Tristram by Rule and Rule's wife. And when he grew older, Cornwall the wise taught him many things, to play upon the harp and to play at chess, to use a sword and a spear, and to ride a horse. And he took him through many foreign lands, so that he might learn to speak their languages. When Tristram was a tall youth, it chanced that a ship of Norway came to Lyonesse to trade, and the merchant spoke well with Rual, and was kindly entertained. But ever he looked upon Tristram, and at the last he invited Tristram to come aboard his ship and play at chess with him. And Tristram came, and he beat the merchant at every game. But while they played, the sailors drew up the anchor silently, hoisted the great white sails, and slipped out to sea, meaning to sell Tristram as a slave for much money. A great storm arose, however, and for 9 nights and days drove the ship before it, and all aboard feared greatly for their lives. Then the sailors clamored, saying that a curse was upon them for stealing Tristram, and the merchant hearkened to them, and set Tristram ashore upon the nearest land they chanced to see, and it happened that this was Cornwall. And when Tristram was come to shore, the storm ceased, and the sun smiled out again. In Cornwall he came soon to King Mark's court at Tintagel, knowing not yet that Mark was his uncle, for still he believed that Rual was his real father. King Mark entertained the wanderer kindly, and Tristram served him so well that before long he rose to be the king's nearest and most trusted counselor. Then Rual came, seeking the wide world over for his lost fosterling, and he found Tristram with Mark, and he saw that God had been working in these things. When Mark knew that Tristram was his own nephew, he made much of him, and the two dwelt there in happiness, for Mark sent his armies under Tristram's charge into Lyonesse, and Morgan the wicked was slain. But Tristram set Rual to reign in Lyonesse, though he made it a part of Mark's kingdom, and himself he dwelt still at Tintagel. On a day Tristram came into the court, and found there great sorrow and lamentation, and in the seat of honour sat a great dark man with a fierce face and mighty hands. This was Sir Merholt of Ireland, who came from Gurman, Ireland's king, to demand tribute from Mark, whom once he had overcome in battle. And the tribute was that 30 lads of noble birth be sent into Ireland to become servants at the court, or else that a knight should do battle with Merholt and slay him. But no one would do battle, for never was there a stronger knight in the world than Merholt. "Shame be to you all," cried Tristram. "Call you yourselves men, that you sell your own sons into slavery?" "But, nephew, we may not do otherwise," said King Mark. "You can fight," cried Tristram. "Refuse to pay the tribute, do battle with Gurman the Irish tyrant, or let a knight of yours fight and slay this boastful braggart Sir Merholt." But none dared to fight, and Merholt laughed in scorn. "I will fight with you, wild hound of Ireland," cried Tristram, and he struck Sir Merholt across the face with his glove, so that there might be no drawing back with honour. The duel was to be upon a little island off the coast of Cornwall. With swords only were they to fight, and alone, with none to watch. Merholt came first in a little boat, and moored it to the shore, but Tristram pushed out his own boat, so that it drifted away. "What do you, insolent child?" growled Merholt. "You will need your boat when you want to run away from me." "2 men came living to this island," Tristram said simply. "1 living man only shall depart." Then Merholt laughed and drew his sword. Tristram drew his also, and they fought all day, giving each other many sore blows. And Merholt wounded Tristram once, a deep gash in the thigh. "That shall be your death," he laughed, "for upon my sword is a magic ointment, and there are few indeed who can heal the wound into which it comes." Then in a fury Tristram rushed upon him, shouting, "Treacherous and ungentle knight, thus do I answer you!" And he clave through Merholt's helmet and deep into Merholt's skull, and his sword chipped, leaving a little piece in the wound. But Merholt fell to the ground, stricken to death, and yielded himself to Tristram. And that evening the men of Ireland set him upon a ship and sailed sadly home to Dublin. And there Merholt died, for all that his sister Queen Iseult could do, and she was skilled above all other women in the healing of wounds. But she drew out the broken chip of steel, and kept it in a casket, swearing vengeance upon the striker of that blow. Tristram lay sick in Tintagel, and none might cure his wound. And at length the wise men told him that in Ireland lay the cure, for thence the poison came, and only Queen Iseult might be able to heal it. Tristram went to Ireland in disguise. He called himself the minstrel Tramtris, and sang so well that those who found him brought him to the court. Now Gurman and Iseult had one child only, the loveliest damsel in the world, whose name was Iseult. All men speak of her the world over as Iseult the Fair, and surely there is none fairer. These eyes have seen her, and they have seen the beauties of many lands. King Gurman wished greatly that his daughter should learn to play upon the harp, yet there was no man in Ireland skilled enough to teach her. He heard of the minstrel Tramtris, whose harping all men praised, and he sent for him. Tramtris came, borne in a litter. "This wound I got of pirates as I voyaged to Ireland," he told the king. "I travelled with a merchant in a ship of rich merchandise, and the sea robbers took us after a fierce fight. They slew all on the ship, but me they spared because of my harping, and they set me in a little boat with food and water, and therein your people found me when I drifted at length near to the Irish coast." Then the Queen Iseult tended Tramtris the minstrel, so that his wound closed up and grew better day by day, until he was whole again. And day by day he taught the fair Iseult to play upon the harp and to sing, and his heart was stirred by her beauty. Yet still he set fame and deeds of arms before love, so that he wooed her not. For a year dwelt Tristram, unknown in Ireland, and at the end of that time he sailed back to Lyonesse, into Cornwall, and came to King Mark at Tintagel. But King Mark had heard tell of Iseult the Fair, and when Tristram spoke of her, his royal heart was stirred, and he held counsel with his lords, saying to them, "King Gurman of Ireland has no other child. Would it not be well for both our lands if we made a firm peace together, and I took the fair Iseult to wife?" The nobles thought that this was indeed wise. But how may it be brought about?" they asked. "Gurman of Ireland and Iseult, his queen, hate us for slaying of Merholt, hate us also for the ceasing of our tribute. How then shall you win the hand of the princess Iseult?" Then answered Mark, "On this thing have I set my heart. Some means must be found." He looked towards Tristram, and the lords murmured among themselves, for they grew jealous of Tristram, fearing that he would be next king of Cornwall if Mark had no children. Now Tristram knew of this, and wishing to prove to them that he had no ambitions toward the kingship of Cornwall, he rose and said, "My uncle, and you, lords of Cornwall, this is a dangerous venture indeed, yet I will undertake it, for I have been once into Ireland, and there Queen Iseult cured me of my wound, though against Tristram of Lyonesse she had vowed eternal hatred and vengeance. Tristram set sail in one small ship with scarcely 30 men, and he came to Ireland at dead of night, and anchored his ship in a quiet haven. If any question you," he said to his faithful friend Kerwenwall, who had accompanied him, "say that we are merchants, and that I, your captain, have gone into the land to make bargains with the merchants of Ireland." Now at that time there was a dragon in Ireland, a fearful monster, which devoured the people and laid waste the land. And King Gurman had promised that whoever slay the dragon might have to wife his daughter, the fair Iseult. This Tristram had heard, and he went on shore that night fully armed, and sought out the dragon's lair high up among the burnt rocks above a fire-scorched valley. Early in the morning, when the red rays of the rising sun slanted down the valley like blood dripping between the rocks, Tristram saw 3 knights and one following them ride over the pass and down towards the lair of the dragon. And anon he heard the dragon roar, and there came cries of men in mortal anguish, and a cruel smoke curled up among the rocks. Then the one man who had followed the knights at a distance came galloping back the way he'd come, and spurring his horse to make it go yet faster. Now this was the Seneschal of King Gurman, a cowardly knight and a braggart, who dared never face the dragon, yet who boasted often that full many times he had ridden in quest of it. Tristram rode quietly down the valley, and at length he saw the dragon standing over one of the knights whom it had slain. A terrible monster it was, with great shining claws, scales of blue and green, and jaws breathing fire and smoke between sharp white teeth. Tristram set his spear in rest and charged the dragon suddenly. His shield held well before him, and the monster turned at the sound of hoofs and made ready to seize him with open jaws. Right well aimed Sir Tristram, so that the spear entered at the dragon's mouth and pierced deep towards its heart. Tristram leapt forward over the dragon's head, and the monster, screaming with rage and pain, slew the horse in a blast of fire, and began quickly to devour it. But the spear, though the wooden handle charred swiftly away, left its sharp point deep in the creature's vitals, and it went screaming away into a rocky ravine, leaving the horse half-eaten. Tristram followed swiftly on foot, and met the dragon at the valley's head. There for an hour the battle raged, Tristram sheltering behind rocks, lest the scorching flame should destroy him. Many times he wounded it, yet might not slay it, but the spear point drew nearer to its heart, so that at last it rolled over in agony. Then Tristram rushed forward and drove in his sword right to the hilt, and so the dragon died. But in its dying it breathed such a blast of flame and poison upon Tristram that his shield melted and dripped from his arm, and he fell to the ground half poisoned by its breath. Presently, however, he crept to the dead dragon, and cut out its tongue, placing it in the pouch at his side. Then he began seeking for the way out of the valley, but ere long the poison overcame him, and he fell down in a deep swoon and lay like one dead. Then the false Cynical came silently into the valley, and he saw the dragon lie dead, and Tristram dead also, or so it seemed. Laughing to himself, that cowardly knight cut off the dragon's head, bounded upon his horse, and went with all speed to the court of King German. "Lord King," he cried, "see, I have slain the dragon. Fulfill now your promise, and give me in marriage your daughter, the fair Iseult." Then was German much distressed, feeling full sure that the cowardly Cynical could never have slain the dragon. Yet there was the head, and he knew not how to question the deed. But Iseult the fair came in tears to her mother, Queen Iseult. "Rather than marry him, I will slay myself," she cried. Things have not come yet to such a pass," answered Iseult the queen. "For sure am I that the Cynical slew not the dragon." That night the two of them went secretly to the place, and found there the dead dragon, headless and terrible in the moonlight, and there also they found Tristram lying in a sore swoon. Then Iseult cried out in surprise, "Lo, here lies Tramtris the minstrel, whether alive or dead I know not. He is clad in knightly armor, his shield is melted, and his sword stained to the hilt with the dark blood of the dragon." Then they had Tristram carried secretly to the palace, and the Queen Iseult worked so well with her skill and medicine that in a little while Tristram came out of the swoon, and told them how he had slain the dragon, showing as further proof the tongue which he had placed in his pouch. Then Queen Iseult said, "Tell me, Tramtris, wherefore came you into Ireland, and why did you go up against the dragon?" "I came as merchant," Tristram answered, "and feeling that we of Cornwall were not well loved of the Irish, I thought to find favour and peace in the sight of this folk by slaying the dragon." "Favour and peace shall be yours to your dying day," said Iseult the queen, and she swore it with a great oath. The day came when King German must redeem his pledge to the dragon slayer, and the Cynical came proudly before the court, vaunting his courage and boasting that Iseult the fair was his already. But Queen Iseult arose and defied him, and there came Tristram and called him coward and cheat. "I slew the dragon," cried the Cynical. "Behold its head, which I cut off before the beast was well dead." Look within the dragon's mouth," commanded the queen. And when they found that its tongue was gone, and that Tristram had it in his pouch, all men rejoiced at the proof and mocked the Cynical. But he grew mad with rage, called Tristram a liar and a thief, and challenged him to the ordeal by battle. "On the third day shall the battle be," said German the king. When the day was come, Iseult the fair looked well to Tristram's armor, and her heart was heavy, as she thought of what might chance that day. She drew Tristram's sword out of its scabbard and gazed earnestly upon it, and as she did so she saw that a chip was wanting from the blade. With a great fear at her heart she brought the piece of steel which had been drawn from the head of her uncle, Sir Merault, and it fitted exactly. Then she went swiftly to her mother and said, "Lo, this minstrel Tramtris, whom we have saved, is none other than Tristram of Lyonesse, who slew Merault. Here you may see the proof by the sword which struck the blow, and with this sword will I now slay him." But the queen held her back, and together they went to Tristram and spoke with him. Then he told them all, hiding not even the reason for his second coming to Ireland. "Then let us swear peace with Sir Tristram," said Iseult the queen, "for King Mark is a noble match for you, and a brave man. But if Tristram does not help us, then the Seneschal must become your husband." So the oath was sworn, and Tristram went forth to do the battle with the Seneschal, and he fought so well that day that the Seneschal died beneath his sword, and Iseult the fair was won as wife to King Mark. Tristram's ship put into Dublin with all honour, and the cabin was made ready to receive Iseult, who came aboard the loveliest damsel in the world, followed only by Brangwain, her faithful friend and attendant. Now, before the ship set sail, Queen Iseult, by her arts, brewed a strange potion. She set it in a wine flask, and brought it to the lady Brangwain, saying to her, "Lo, now I give you into your keeping my daughter's happiness. Guard you this potion with your life, and see to it that on her wedding day the Princess Iseult drinks of it, and King Mark also, and none else besides. For it is a love potion so strong that nothing in the world may undo its effects, so strong that once a man and a maiden have drunk of it together, they shall love one another even unto the world's end, with a love greater than any in the world." Tristram set sail from Dublin, and the ship was many days on the high seas, sailing merrily through the joyous springtide, leaping like a white bird of love from the curling waves. All day Iseult the fair sat in the cabin, and there Tristram tended her, singing brave lays of great lovers and mighty deeds, telling her tales of old Cornwall, of Young the queen, and how Merlin brought Uther Pendragon to dark Tintagel, telling in song and in story of Arthur the good knight, the good king and his knights, the flower of chivalry, and of the wondrous realm of Logres which they were building up like the clear light of God in the dark land of Britain. But Lady Brangwain took no joy in the dancing waves, but lay sick in a cabin far apart. On a day when song and tale were ended, and Iseult sat with Tristram, playing at chess with pieces wrought cunningly in red and in white ivory upon a chessboard of carved cedar, they grew thirsty. Then Tristram espied the flask of wine which stood in a casket in the great cabin, and Iseult said, laughing, Brangwain has brought it with her to drink when the sickness of the sea departs from her. Let us drink it now, and when she rises from her bed, she will find but an empty bottle." They poured the wine into golden cups, knowing not that it was the love potion brewed by Iseult, the wise queen, knowing not that they held fate in their hands, and gave themselves to much joy and a deeper sorrow. Then, laughing still, they pledged one another, draining the sweet wine to the very dregs. Straightway strong love awoke in their hearts, and the world grew dim because of the light which now shone about each of them in the other's eyes. As they drained the flask, Brangwain entered the cabin and saw what had chanced. She spoke no word of it to them for many a year thereafter, but, cold at heart, she flung the wine-flask far into the deep sea, lamenting that she had ever come upon that voyage, lamenting that drink which should be the death of Tristram and Iseult. Fair was that voyage through the sunny seas, more bright the sunshine than ever it might be again. For Tristram and Iseult spoke together soon of their great love, and were happy for the brief hours of their youth, more happy than any lovers since the world began. Speeding over the blue sea, they forgot the sorrow that awaited them in Cornwall, forgot the struggle betwixt love and honour, and remembered only that spring was short, and that love held them as one in the joyous sunlight. All too soon came the tall ship to the dark crags of Tintagel, and there Iseult the fair was wedded to Mark, the king of Cornwall, for that way it seemed that honour called her. and for honour Tristram must let go his love and leave his youth behind him. Moreover, had he sailed away from Iseult, such war would have been twixt Cornwall and Ireland that might not have ended without the slaying of many men and the keen sorrow of 2 kingdoms. Little else there is to tell. Tristram of Lyonesse wrought many deeds till his fame was carried through the world, but ever he loved Iseult, the Queen of Cornwall, and ever she loved him and hated Mark. Then one spring love triumphed over honour, and Mark's wife sought Tristram in the greenwood. She went a-hunting with Bragwaine her maid, and Mark, suspecting naught, set Tristram his nephew in command of her huntsmen and attendants. But right soon the hunt was left behind them, and the lovers sat alone together by a clear stream where the white daisies dew the new grass like tears. They met again, many and many a time. Love was turned into fear and grew dark and wild, for so love must that it is lawless and dishonourable. Yet blame them not ever much, for the love charm was upon them always. For them surely there is much excuse, where none could be for others who thus break their vows. Ere long the nobles, who still hated Tristram, grew to suspect his love and whispered of it to Mark. The king for long would not believe it, for well he loved and trusted both wife and nephew. But on a day Marjodo, a jealous knight, brought Mark where he might see Tristram and Iseult seated under a tree together, close by the murmuring stream. After that there was no longer room for doubt. King Mark called together his council and sought to have Tristram condemned to death, but this, though they hated him, his nobles and his knights would not permit. For none there was so mighty as Tristram, and no man so fit to save Cornwall in times of need. Moreover, the people loved him, and had he been put to death, civil war might have broken out. So King Mark banished Sir Tristram, sent him out of Cornwall and fair Lyonesse, so far from Iseult the fair that hardly might he see her ever again. And he wanders now through all the land of Britain, seeking for the comfort that he cannot find, wandering in minstrel's garb and singing, ever singing the song of his love. Iseult of the Emerald Isle, still I seek you mile on mile, through the wide world following. Love, a white bird on the wing, Iseult, though the world wax old, never shall our love grow cold. Still while youth and spring are sure, lives our love and shall endure. Iseult in the Iseult in the after time, poets still shall fit their rhyme, tell of love beyond compare, Tristram and Iseult the fair. The minstrel ceased from his tale, and a great silence was over all who sat in the great hall at Camelot. Only Lancelot bowed his head in his hands, and the tears ran between his fingers as he thought of his own love for Guinevere, for King Arthur's queen. "Minstrel," said King Arthur presently, "how comes it that you know so well all the things that have befallen Sir Tristram of Lyonesse?" The minstrel smiled sadly as he rose from the stool and stood tall and noble to behold before King Arthur. "I know it well," he said, "right well indeed, even as a man knows his own sorrow, for I am Tristram of Lyonesse." There was a little murmur through the hall at this, of wonder and of pity, but King Arthur rose from his seat and came down to Tristram and greeted him. "Right welcome you are to Camelot," he cried. "Welcome indeed to me and to all this fellowship of the Round Table. Your name was spoken to us by Merlin the wise enchanter on the day of the making of the table, and see, there's a seat at it for you, yonder siege beside Lancelot, where your name grows even now in letters of gold. Welcome, true knight of Logres." And so Sir Tristram became a knight of the Round Table, and after Lancelot and Gawain there was no knight so worthy to sit there as he. For many years he came on every feast of Pentecost to take his place at the board, and many were the mighty deeds which he wrought for Logres. But always he sorrowed for the love of Iseult the fair, and with a love and with a sorrow that no time might heal. After some years he was married to another Iseult, daughter of Jovelin, the Duke of Arundel, who was called Iseult of the White Hands, and she brought him much comfort, and he was a true and noble husband to her. yet ever his heart turned towards Iseult, the Queen of Cornwall. Wherefore Iseult of the White Hands was jealous at heart. At the last Tristram was wounded with a poisoned spear as he fought to save Cahadan, his wife's brother, and the wound festered and might not be cured. Then Tristram said, My death is upon me, unless Iseult of Cornwall comes to my aid, for she alone has all the skill which was her mother's. So he bade the faithful Cerwenol take ship and sail to Tintagel, to beg Iseult to come and cure him, and if she would come, Cerwenol was to hoist a white sail on his ship as he returned, but a black sail if she would not come. Iseult of Cornwall came with all the speed she might, and Cerwenol hoisted the white sail, but Tristram lay upon his bed so weak that he could not rise and look out from his window. Then he said to his wife, Go now and look out to sea. Cerwenol's ship will soon be nearing the land, with Iseult the Fair aboard, should the sail be white, but there will be a black sail if she will not come. When Iseult of the White Hands looked out over the sea, and saw the ship of Cerwenol flying over the waves with all its white sails set, but in her jealousy and her hatred for Iseult of Cornwall, she said to Tristram, Lo now, I see Cerwenol's ship sailing heavily through the waves, and the sails are all black. Then Tristram turned his face to the wall. God keep you, my love, Iseult the Fair, he said, for I shall not look upon your face again. Then he ceased to struggle for his life, and in a few minutes Tristram of Lyonesse was dead. And when Iseult the Fair, Queen of Cornwall, found him dead, she knelt at his side until her heart broke for very sorrow, and she died also. And they were buried in one grave, for Iseult of the White Hands repented of her jealousy when it was too late. And over the grave she planted 2 rose trees, one red and one white, and as they grew, the 2 trees leant over the graves toward one another, and their branches twined together, and they grew into one tree bearing roses both red and white. For never in all the world have there been 2 such faithful lovers as Sir Tristram of Lyonesse and Iseult the Fair.